Yeah.
Why is it important for women to tell these stories without shame, without fear?
The only way to heal a wound is to expose it. If you keep a wound hidden in your sock, heat, bacteria loves to fester in it. So I think the first sign to healing is breaking the silence and doing it in a way that is not harmful. That is the only way to get your power back.
I have so many girl children who see me as a father figure.
Beautiful.
And I encourage other men out there, it's important to stand with these children.
Yes.
When you can.
Yes.
And be genuine, have conversations that matter in their lives.
I think you absolutely got won my heart today, because that was the question that was coming and my comment to that is men have a very crucial role to play in modeling acceptable behavior to the girl child.
I know that I got inspired by her story, and you will be definitely inspired by her story. I dare not introduce her to this community, and I'll ask her to just briefly introduce herself to us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Abu. It's a pleasure to be here. So my name is Comfort Dondo, and I am the founding executive director of Pumulani, Minnesota African Women Against Violence. It is a nonprofit organization whose mission is ending all forms of violence through culturally specific lens and fostering independence and sustainability for women of African diaspora.
Wow. You're also an author.
Yes.
Don't skip that, please.
Yes, I am a 4-time author. And I'm also a mother, which is one of the most important jobs I have, mother to 3 children. And I wouldn't end my introduction without saying I'm a community builder.
Community builder.
Yes.
Great. Sister Dondo, welcome to Afrisota.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about where you come from precisely in Africa, and perhaps your early life in that place where you come from.
Beautiful. I come from one of the most blessed nations on the southern side of the world, Zimbabwe specifically, a small teapot-sized country, born and raised. I grew up in the outskirts of the capital city of Harare, and I decided to move to Minnesota at the age of 18 with a very small suitcase and a big dream of conquering the world. I moved in the coldest parts of Minnesota, February, to St. Catherine College back then. Now it's called St. Catherine University. And that was my journey to Minnesota through education. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. And you had finished your high school in Zimbabwe?
Yes, I finished my high school in Zimbabwe. And I researched a lot of scholarship opportunities through a program called United States Achievers Program, which catered to brilliant students who, without the scholarship support, would not be able to make it fully to the U.S. And
You must be one of those brilliant students.
Well, humbly, I'll admit.
So, your early childhood in Zimbabwe, do you remember any significant moments in your early childhood? How you grew up in your city, in your village, your family life?
I loved my childhood, and I always go back. And the community builder in me actually has kept the community that I grew up around on social media now connected. I grew up on the outskirts. It was a small railroad township called Chizhanje, and it was named after the fruit tree that was around that area. To the outsiders, this place was supposedly poor, but for us it was rich because we had each other, we had community. And up to date, I don't understand when people said that part of town, it was equivalent to Nazareth. But I had a blast growing up. We had a beautiful time. My childhood was both beautiful. I came from a home with a father who was amazing, who was a great provider. But I think with many women that I work with right now, there was also some downsides to it. There was a lot of domestic violence in my childhood growing up. There was a lot of childhood trauma that I didn't know then as a child was that, but that would push me to my work as an adult, which I'll share later.
Okay, all right. Yeah. And I just want to highlight that I'm also from Africa, and when you talk about some of those childhood traumas that we didn't even know they were traumas at the time.
Yes.
It's like cut across Africa, and so
Absolutely.
many children suffer these traumas without even knowing. And sometimes the parents themselves don't even know that their behaviors, their actions can be traumatizing to their children.
Absolutely.
But thank you so much for sharing that. Now, you came to Minnesota after being favored for that scholarship.
Yes.
And that journey to Minnesota, that day when you heard that you have been granted that scholarship and you had to pack your bags, go to the airport, was that the first time leaving Zimbabwe? It
would have been my second time leaving Zimbabwe. I had been to Botswana for a scripture union trip before then. But let me say my journey was not as smooth. I actually got denied a visa because this was the time where the Robert Mugabe regime, things were going really down, and the U.S.-Zimbabwe relations were not as great. So they were really trying to narrow down who they gave the visa to. But I think from a young age, I've never learned to take no for an answer. So I researched the fine print on the denial letter, and it said I had the right to appeal as a Zimbabwean citizen. So I would wake up the next morning after my denial, and I went to the American embassy and I appealed their decision. And I pled my case on why they needed to let me come to school here. And that's how I got my visa.
Wow.
Yes.
That's at 18?
At 18, yes.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Then you went to the plane and you're coming to Minnesota. Did you have any family here to receive you, or you were just going to St. Catherine?
I intentionally chose to be in a state that was away from my older sisters. Being the baby in my family, I wanted to figure out things on my own. So I had a sister on the East Coast and one down south in the North Carolina area. But I chose to come to Minnesota. But one thing I didn't know, how cold it would get in Minnesota. I was not warned enough for that. So that was the culture shock to Minnesota.
Wow, okay. So St. Catherine in the United States for the first time, in Minnesota, one of the coldest places, culture shock.
Absolutely.
Apart from the cold, how did you interact with all these white kids, white teachers now, and everything? How was that for you?
St. Catherine is mostly white. A few things that I still remember vividly was the fact that the moment I stepped on campus, there was almost a push to me being asked to join the Black Student this, Black Student that, Black Association. And while I was in Zimbabwe, we were a British colony, but we were majority, and our blackness was never at the forefront of who we were. We were just human beings. And so I remember asking some of my friends, why do I need to go to the Black Student Association? That was the culture shock number one, to understand that I was Black. Some of the cultural shock that I found when I got here was growing up, I would watch Western movies, and the way the indigenous people or the Native Americans were portrayed in those movies that my father loved watching with me was nothing next to what I observed when I came here. I started learning just how graceful and just how cultured and just how gentle those indigenous folks were. And so there was a lot of confusion. The third part that shocked me was also how the African Americans were portrayed in media back home. Because media was run by the British. Remember, we were a colony. I started to ask so many questions. And my 18, 19, 20, up to 21-year-old brain could just not process until after I graduated.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. Wow, that's deep.
Yeah.
And you finished school, and now what was next for comfort?
Finishing school, my first degree was nutritional science with a women's studies minor. I really had a desire to go back home to Zimbabwe, which I did go home for an internship. I interned with the Bill Melinda Gates Foundation. I was interested in working on HIV and its prevention from mother to child. So I knew exactly what I wanted to do. But then going home, back to Zimbabwe, there was a shock again. The opportunities were not there. There was a lot of nepotism, unless you know someone who knows someone. And so I didn't see a future. So I decided to come back to the United States to pursue a higher education. And in my mind, I was buying time because I had made a promise to my people, my little small township, that I was going to get educated and come back and build with them. But that did not happen. So went back to school. met the husband, met the boyfriend then, and then life kind of just took a different turn.
The lucky man.
The lucky man. I think he was very lucky.
Wow. Yeah. Because such resilience, you don't get it all the time. And now a young comfort has left Zimbabwe and has come to the US, finished school, went back home, where she thought she would build and develop her community and give people empowerment. And home said, well, the charity that you want to begin at home will definitely not
won't
begin
be at home. Yeah, that was the feeling.
The prophet is not recognized here.
No, that's one of my favorite verses.
Yeah, but that did not stop you.
No.
You came back and decided to pursue education. Why did you think it was important for you to get more educated? And you said you were buying time. You didn't give up on that hope.
I did not.
Yeah.
I think the main thing is that we are children of Robert Gabriel Mugabe. Robert Mugabe was and will be always one of the most educated African presidents.
Definitely.
And he set precedents in our culture as Zimbabweans.
Yeah.
I think anywhere you will go, you'll find Zimbabweans are some of the most educated people. So education is part of our moral fabric.
Okay.
I also knew that to be a part of the system, you must be one with that system. Okay. So I had to learn and educate myself within this US system.
All right.
Yes,
all right.
yeah.
That's great. Now, as an African immigrant, not just a student who left Zimbabwe and came to study, now after the studies, you had to settle in as an African immigrant. And you know how the narratives go.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you know how the narratives go with the African immigrants in the United States. Now, outside the school circle, how did you fit in the community being that you're an African immigrant? And even with the fact that you have studied from the US systems?
I love that question. That was one of the most, and will remain one of the most difficult transitions in my life. I stayed on campus most of the time, so I was a little bit sheltered. I experienced some of the isms on campus, but again, it was in a sheltered space. And I've shared this with the St. Kate's leadership so they could change some of their policies.
Yeah.
I faced some professors who were racist, who had biases, and I always challenged, as I did the American embassy lady, right? Yeah. But coming outside into the real world was where I would say I started experiencing the systemic barriers in the U.S. full throttle. In the workplace, I remember experiencing things like racism without having a name for it and having to actually go back and study what that was. Microaggressions, it's hard to put a name, to point a finger to them. And so experiencing all these things was just very confusing. And then on the other hand, as a young woman who is now a young mom, who was now beginning to face some challenges around domestic violence in my own life, I felt isolated because I did not know a lot of immigrants. There was a lot of cultural spaces where Somalis, most largely numbers, right? Ethiopians. And so I kind of created my own network. But it was not really easy as young as I was. It was before I turned 25 where all this was happening. Yeah.
That could be very difficult. And it reminds me, when we are in Africa growing up amongst our own Black people, we don't even know, we don't process racism.
No.
We don't process all the challenges of how Black people are segregated. You know, we don't process the racial and societal disparity in the way that we process it when we move over here.
Absolutely.
And sometimes even interacting with the Black people might be very challenging because they see us as sellouts. You know, the fact that we don't know how to call that racism.
Yes.
The fact that you're asking the question, why should I join the Black community of students, not the other one? You know?
Absolutely.
The Black children who know what's going on, they'll be like, who is she? You know?
Who does she think she is?
Why do you want to join the white community and not the Black one? But we don't process racism the same way because our histories are totally
They're different. Absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about this love story.
The love story. Yeah, so I met my then husband. I went to an all-girls school, and so we had a brother school across University of St. Thomas. Yeah. And so And some of us, very proactive, we would take some classes there, just to spice things up.
Yeah.
And that's how I met my then husband. He was actually pursuing his master's in business administration. We connected, fell in love.
Yeah.
And I say, when you fall in love, whether they are red flags during the time, you kind of turn them into orange and pink.
Yeah.
And, just ignored a lot of signs. A very wonderful man, but also with some blind spots that he needed to work on. And those blind spots grew bigger and bigger as our relationship. But out of it, I got beautiful, beautiful children. And that is a gift that I will never, I'll never, regret.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. I love the way you put it. In your previous response, you mentioned domestic violence.
Yes.
And one thing that came out strongly in the way you express yourself is the fact that as an African immigrant in the United States, seeking help for domestic violence was difficult for you.
Yes.
This is unimaginable. We think when we cross the border and get here, we are free people.
No.
And now, here you are, African immigrant, experiencing domestic violence.
Yes.
And you can't be helped. You are educated.
That is the secret question.
Tell us something about that.
Absolutely. So I remember vividly this particular time, and it was not just one time, because research says that women will take at least 7 times before they leave. And between that 5th to 7th time, we have homicides. They get killed because the police has already been involved.
Yeah.
Such was my case. I had 2 things against me. I had a community that after I announced the divorce, they ostracized me. So I became an outcast from my own community, my own Zimbabwean community.
Yeah.
And I was going back to them for support, but I felt really isolated. There was a shaming with that. So that was difficult.
Yeah.
In my mind, I was thinking, I think some of the sisters that I helped when they got here would probably house me in their basement because that is how I'm wired. But that was not it. It was you became the other immediately. And then back to the mainstream domestic violence shelter programs. I like to share this particular one. I say domestic violence shelters in the US or in Minnesota, they are great for specific women. This movement was started by white middle-class women. We have set a number of children on average. It is not great for all women as our demographics change. I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
An African immigrant woman who's fled from a war-torn country might have her 5 children, and she might have her 2 sisters' children with her. And these might be teenage boys. In Africa, we live we live beyond our nuclear family. Yeah. We have an extended family we live with. So when this woman wants to flee domestic violence, she wants to carry all her children.
Yeah.
So usually she has a choice to make. Do I take all the children? Do I leave the teenage boys with my abuser? Or do I just stay here? And unfortunately, the answer is she chooses the later, to stay. My experience in a domestic violence shelter was I was in between finishing my studies. I was greeted with a lot of rules that almost mimicked my abuser's space. I tried to negotiate that I had an evening class.
Yeah.
I would like to drop my kids to a babysitter so I could finish school. Again, I knew education was my way out.
Yeah.
And those rules got in my way. So that was the moment I chose to go back to my abuser, which again, research shows that's the most dangerous time. That was the time I almost lost my life.
You lose even your self-worth.
Yes.
Yeah. So you lose even your self-worth. It's like going back to your vomit.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And at this time, when you're going back to eat your own vomit, it's a moment of desperation.
It is desperation. It is where most women are killed. Because there's been a lot, like I said, there's been a lot of back and forth happening. And I think I would say there was also a lack of culturally understanding me as an African immigrant woman. The advocates did not look like me. They didn't need to look like me, but they needed to be trained to understand that I've already left everything I ever owned. Yeah. Maybe the only thing as an African mother that brings me my pride is to cook for my children. So maybe if I requested, I would like fufu, because that's what I feed my children. I'm just giving examples. That was not there. There's a sense of you should be thankful. At least you have some help. Be grateful. You have some help. But it's beyond that. We have to understand the whole woman and what the loss that she just went through. So when I faced those challenges, and I continue to face those now with the women that I work with, I remember vividly a sister from Kenya. She was pregnant when she fled. She was at a domestic violence shelter, a little bit out of town in the outskirts. And she was just craving what they call sukuma wiki, the green collard greens. That's all she wanted. And the shelter had a hard time with her even bringing her own, or having a friend bring her own to warm it up for her. And I was wondering, what part of this don't you understand? That this woman is pregnant, and the only thing that brings her comfort right now after being in this traumatic situation is that green vegetable. Small things like that. There's a lack of cultural translation or cultural humility that I've experienced in the shelter, in some of the shelters. Wow.
So you went back to your abuser.
I did.
How was that for you?
It was absolutely horrible. I almost lost my life then because he was very angry. And then I would find myself at the rescue of a community member from church who then helped me with refuge. And it was a journey on its own, but I eventually managed to get out.
Now, your abuser, was this a fellow African?
No, actually, my abuser was not African.
Oh.
He's a Minnesotan man. Yes.
Kidding?
Yes, it was a Minnesotan man.
Person?
White man. If you meet him today, you will like him. He's very charming. Yeah, he's a very, very charming, handsome man, but had his demons, and we were both young. It's not to give excuses for him. I think I say this to say, for the work of brothers like Brother Sam Wangi, Global Fatherhood Foundation, I say, even our policies should not be punitive or penalize, just punish. You beat your wife, get punished. Let's get to the root cause of that behavior. Because if you punish him, goes to jail, and you don't treat the root, another sin is going to come up. Because he'll move to the next relationship, right? So I look at this whole abuse, domestic violence, I look at it very holistically. That is not just bad behavior. There's a root to that bad behavior that we need to address.
Oh my goodness. Okay. That is interesting to know. So the lack of cultural relevance in this shelter where you were, we from Africa have our perspectives. We look at things differently.
Yes.
And the Caucasians, the Westerners, have their own cultures. They look at things differently.
Right.
And not only that you were at the shelter as an African immigrant, you were there and facing challenges perpetrated by a white person.
Yes. Absolutely.
So which means, if anything, you would be setting up two white people against themselves, fighting each other because of what?
That's absolutely an African immigrant
woman,
a foreigner, an alien, as they call it. Yes.
Wow. So that alone is enough for people to be blindsided.
Yes.
To even go deeper into your culture.
Yes.
To try and be in your shoes to understand things with your perspective.
Absolutely.
Why is cultural sensitivity? Why is that important, especially for shelters like those?
Culture moves beyond race. Culture is the little untold things that we do as a people. I'm from Zimbabwe. You're from Cameroon. Even the side of Cameroon that you come from, there's some cultural unsaid secrets that only a fellow brother or sister from that region that you come from will understand. So culture goes deep. Because when we say culture, people say African culture. What is that? Culture goes so deep. We have tribes. There's culture, in those groups, there's different culture. Cultural competency is very important, but it cannot work without cultural humility. Because when you go for the cultural competency trainings and you believe that you understand people, without the cultural humility, that keeps you at a place of being the learner, learning from the person who's receiving services, there can always be a level of arrogance. So I say, couple your cultural competency with cultural humility. And for me, cultural humility is to say, I can never understand one's culture, but I can yearn to press towards understanding bits of it, so I can understand the client.
Wow,
Yeah.
awesome. You talked about cultural humility. That aspect of experiencing other people's culture, learning other people's culture without judgment.
Yes.
Living what you know, because there's that tendency of people going everywhere and saying, we have the best culture.
Yes.
Oh, these people don't even have a culture.
Yes.
Or
assuming the culture.
Assuming you know their
Yes.
culture. So that aspect of cultural humility, especially with organizations like the shelter where you were, the lack of that can actually become more destructive to the victim.
Absolutely. There's numerous stories of women who have ended up, victims of domestic homicide because they have gone to shelter, and there's been a lot of harm done by staff at the shelter, unknowingly. I think in most cases, one such behaviors or one such practice is one where Israeli women of color, as they like to call us, we're often asked to prove. There's a client who once came to our services after she left a shelter, and she was referred by the city of Brooklyn Park, Brooklyn Park City Police Department, and she had said her husband was wealthy, but he was hitting her, and he had bought her a beautiful car. I think she was driving a Range Rover. Yeah. But when she fled, this particular advocate who was working with her was so obsessed with how could she be unhoused and she's driving such a nice car. So there's all these nuances that women of color, Black indigenous women of color, face too. Sometimes the system, they want you to prove. They don't understand that when our African immigrant sisters are going through domestic violence, they're coming into a shelter, expect a nurse to show up, expect a doctor to show up, expect a physician assistant to show up, or an attorney, because we work on our education. But it doesn't mean no matter how educated I am, I don't need an emergency shelter space. But there's always a proving that we must do, that we are worthy, we are poor enough to be in the shelter.
Wow. So this is you seeking help in an institution that is Minnesota based.
Yes.
And that institution kind of fails you.
Yes.
Sends you back to the person who is offending you.
Yes.
When was the turning point? At what point after going back did you say, okay, I've got to stand up for myself?
My turning point, before I go to my turning point, I want to say homelessness, experiencing homelessness does not always look like what people think in their minds.
Okay.
After that initial incident, I became unhoused in Minnesota for 8 years.
No way.
For 8 years. When I tell people, mine was creative. It was enrolling in graduate school just so I could be housed for 2 years. Okay. It was in motels or hotels, with friends, in my car, while finishing my master's program, because my dissertation, my capstone was ended after my lease was over, and I got kicked out. It was losing my children to the system because I was unhoused, and my ex-abuser used my unhoused situation to deem me as an unfit mom.
So no custody for you?
No custody. The issue with African immigrant women who need housing is one that is not spoken of, and I think it's because there's no data. There's no data. There's no quantitative data to really showcase that to our legislatures. But if a girl like me, who could advocate for herself at the American Embassy in Africa at 18, could not figure out housing stability for 8 years. Imagine a woman who doesn't speak English as a first language.
Who is not as educated as you were.
Who is probably, maybe does not have the level of resiliency to fight. But that's my story. So back to your prior question.
The turning point.
The turning point for me was, there's a time where you reach rock bottom and there's nowhere else more bottom to go to.
Yeah.
That was the place I got. I did a risk analysis and I realized if I stayed in this situation, I was either going to harm someone or I was going to get harmed. and then my children will be without a mother. So I had to make some really extreme decisions.
Yeah.
I had to compromise a lot of what my self or integrity was, even to endure some of those shelter spaces until I could get out of that. But it took me 8 years. Yes. 8 years.
That's resilience, right there.
Yes.
And also, just for the sake of maybe somebody is going through domestic violence and they don't even know how to call it. They don't even know what name to give what they're experiencing. Could you share what were some specific actions from your offender, that you could pinpoint and just to let other people know what domestic violence, paint a picture of domestic violence?
Absolutely. So you're a beautiful African goddess. This person is attracted to you because of all the essence that you bring. But the moment you open the door for them in your life, in your heart, they start to degrade. It doesn't have to be physical all the time. They degrade, they belittle you. When you're in a relationship where you're starting to feel like you're second-guessing yourself all the time, or you are compromising who you know yourself to be because you want to please someone. It's different. You want to please your partner. You can meet 50-50. But if someone is asking you to do things that are demeaning to your core, then I always say to the young women we work with, some of my mentees, if it doesn't feel loving and warm and kind and righteous, it is not loving. And it's time to exit. People usually ask, did he hit you? By the time we get to the hitting, there's already a lot of silent, subtle things that are demeaning to a woman. I also want to talk about another symptom that people don't talk about a lot, which is financial abuse. A lot of sisters go through financial abuse. Economic abuse, in fact, is being legislated towards at the Hill in DC. Financial abuse is when you get in a relationship with someone whose sole purpose is to actually take advantage of you financially. And they would do that in very subtle ways. And then when you start to ask for your loan back or ask for some accountability, there's consequences. So you end up not asking. That is also called financial abuse. And don't get me wrong, I'm not talking about coming together as a partnership and building. That is different. I'm talking about someone who literally is a fraudster who comes into your life. That is very common. And a lot of women to whom this happened are very intelligent. They're very articulate. And so there's a shame that comes with that where they don't share that. They keep that silent.
And then they can be independent if they want to be. Like they have it going.
Yes, absolutely.
And so they don't want to share this vulnerability because everybody looks at you and says, oh, you are a lawyer. You are a magistrate. You are a CNA who is doing so well. You are a nurse. And you're a doctor. So
you're very intelligent.
You don't want to say this because people will be like, okay, you're a doctor and you're going through abuse.
And our African people, we're very intense. We'll be like, why did you let him do that? And I've heard those kind of reactions, right? For we're in a group of friends, and I say, do you know it could happen to you too? It can happen to all of us. So
wow, that's serious. So financial abuse is a thing.
It is a thing. It is very much a thing. Yes.
And it's not about saying don't support your man when they're down.
No, I don't want to be misquoted. I am all about lifting our kings. I love our African kings, lifting them up. Because also in the US, I also noticed that there's a lot of the empowerment of the woman that is living behind the boy child. So I'm always up for opportunities for our brothers. But you will know a scammer when a scammer walks in your life. It's like you've put a rat in your silo. You start to lose a lot of money very quickly. And they're so charming. And before you know it, the account is empty. And you don't know what hit you. So that's a thing.
That's serious. And sometimes these financial abusers are not aware of this. Do you think they are aware of this?
Oh, I think they're very much aware. I think it's their business strategy. Yes. Absolutely.
That's really bad.
It's unfortunate, but it happens a lot more than it's reported, I think.
And there's an issue about when you're a girl growing up, there are certain goals that are set that you as an African woman, when you don't meet them, you are considered an outcast. You are considered as devalued, you know.
Right.
Grow up, school was not really a big thing, but now school is something for African ladies.
Yes.
So grow up, get educated, get married.
Yes.
Get children.
Yes.
You know, it doesn't even matter. You could be the next president of the United States.
If you're not married.
Are you married? Do you have children?
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
And these things, it makes the woman wants to conform to society.
Yes. Pressure.
It makes the woman wants to conform to those societal conventions. You know, the pressure from society.
Oh, absolutely.
And that can make you stay with your pain.
Absolutely.
It can make you stay in the domestic violence for so long.
Oh, yes.
Because you want to portray a sense of we are fine, everything is fine.
Yes.
But you go back home to hell.
Yes. I've heard a lot of the sisters we work with saying, and I've been stealing this language to share with my white sisters in the movement, to say when an African woman marries into a family, she marries the whole clan, the whole village. When she wants to leave, there's retaliation from the whole village. So when you're in the US, you don't want retaliation from the whole village. I had retaliation from my own village.
You can imagine.
Where I had some pastors telling young women who were friends with me, what are you going to learn from Comfort? What can she teach you? Immediately, with a divorce, I became the other, who was a bad example. So you're tainted with a certain picture. And I hope to see that culture come to an end, because it makes a lot of women confined. The devaluing of single mothers is very much rampant in our culture, unfortunately. Even sometimes the way men in our community treat you when they know that you're a single divorcee is also something I want to make sure is highlighted.
Sure.
It can be abusive.
And definitely when they have reduced you to nothing, it doesn't matter sometimes how hard you try. It doesn't matter sometimes how resilient
your portfolio,
you know,
your accolades, they don't matter.
It's like everything goes down the drain.
Yes.
But you did not let that make you into a weak person.
Oh no, absolutely not.
Comfort. You said no.
No way. No way.
How did you get back up and say, you know what? I might have been to the ground, I might have been to the floor, but I'm going to wake up because this is not about me. How did you turn this around?
I love we've got rocks here. I was at rock bottom. I started chipping at every rock and started to turn them into bricks and platforms and climbed back up. And for me, the process of climbing back up to the top was about knowing the things I needed to silently get rid of. I started getting rid of places and energies and people that did not honor me, the whole of me. I started to choose the few people. My circle got smaller. I became okay with not having to be accepted in some of my communities. And I started to seek out new friends that understood. So I surrounded myself with mentors, amazing mentors who had been through the same journey as myself. It wasn't easy, but I did it. Because I have a daughter. And I wanted to make sure that one day I can look at her, if she were ever, God forbid, to be in the same situation with me, and she came and said she's been shunned in the community, I can give her a curriculum based on my own experience. So I did that. And I'm doing great.
Wow. Awesome.
Yes.
What's the difference of coming out of that kind of a situation and just looking at all men as it could be very
bitter.
easy,
to be bitter.
Like you look at a man and you just put your relationship into every man that you see in front of you. You're not doing that. You gave me a hug today.
Oh yes. Oh yes. And actually I'm newly engaged.
Oh,
you know, so I have found love. You see, if there's any young women who are going through this rough patch, there's always your soulmate out there. So I can answer that. I love that question.
Please take us through that.
Yes.
Coming out of that pit,
the rock bottom. Yes.
How do you get it freed from your system? Like bring you back?
You do a lot of healing. You do a lot of healing work. I did a lot of healing work. Those parts of the rock that I turned into platforms. I did a lot of retreats. I did a lot of therapy. I worked on myself. I love what Dr. Maya Angelou says one time when she's talking to Oprah Winfrey. She says, there's a place in you that has to be so pristine and so clean that you allow only God to touch that place.
Yeah.
For me, that place is my heart. And I believe any woman, any man who's gone through trauma, if you really take time to not be engaged in any relationship with anyone outside of yourself but yourself, there's a certain level of healing that happens that when you get to that frequency of that healing, you will only attract like beings. And I believe that is exactly where I was. And I'll tell you, it's scary. It took me 5 years to get to that point. It took me 5 years to get to that point. You have to heal. Because I see a lot of young women, and I was one of those young women. Yeah. They want to show this other person who abused me that I can be in relationship too. But then you still have wounds that are bleeding. And you're going to probably attract a same person like the one before, and you're going to combine those two bleeding wounds, and it's going to be more futile than the last one. So taking time to heal and giving yourself that grace,
that's strong. That's awesome, because you said something. When you are at the point where you are at peace with yourself, that positivity not only stays within you, but it's reflected wherever you are,
everywhere.
And they say, if you want to be a con man, start living with con men.
Yes, you become the average.
You want to be a drunkard?
True.
Start living with drunkards.
Yes.
You want to be a chain smoker? Yeah. Start living with chain smokers.
It'll become very natural. Yeah.
But if you are also a peaceful person, you are somebody who has gotten to that level of peace.
Absolutely.
Your class has changed.
Absolutely.
You only live with the people who can experience that
level of peace,
and the people who your heart can speak with and see that we are at this level, not just the physical look of people anymore.
No, spiritual.
Yes.
Look. Yes.
So that inner healing. A lot of people want to show that I can do this. You find people divorcing, they're already on the relationship platform or relationship site. You find somebody saying, oh, we're having issues with my wife. They go in Swahili, they say mpango wa kando. You know that? You don't know that?
Kidogo. I speak Kidogo Swahili.
It means having one leg in, one leg out.
Wow.
Mostly men, but nowadays women to do that.
Oh, it's
So you say, oh, we're having issues with my man, instead of maybe dealing with the issues or dealing with yourself.
With yourself.
You start running to get the next man, forgetting that you are running from one man to another man.
And the issues are still there.
The issues are still there.
Still there. And growing, actually, when you do that.
And a bleeding wound is very easy to reopen.
Yes. And in fact, unless it's really healed and it's dry. And the healing, I love the analogy of the healing of the wound. Yeah. To really get a wound to heal, it's painful. It's not comfortable. But you must sit in the discomfort. Yeah. You must put salt on it. You must endure the long nights alone. You must endure the gossip and the chatter from community. Yes. And just not focus on yourself. Yeah. I did it.
After healing yourself, you said to yourself, it will not just be my peace.
Yes.
Pumulani.
Yes.
Lover of peace?
Yes, lover of peace.
Take us about the process.
You did your homework, my brother. You are a true scholar.
Am I pronouncing it right?
Yeah, you did. You are. And I'm very impressed because people will be butchering that name. Yeah. Pumulani. Pumulani was given to me by my ancestors when I was in a place I was still in that rock bottom place, because I formed it when I was unhoused. But I started the process of healing myself. And I say to my daughter yesterday, Pumulani, that's her name, listen to the trees. Can you hear them? I said, Mama, what are you talking about? I said, when you listen to the trees, you will hear them. So when you listen to your spirit, when you listen to the ancestors, you will hear them. Pumulani was given to me by the ancestors. I listened. I did what I needed, what I was instructed to do. Just before COVID. It will be the conduit for the growth that we have had as an organization, because I listened to the instructions. So that was Pumulani, formed 2018. I was on a friend's couch, 3:30 a.m., the most spiritual hour. I was woken up. I was given the instruction of where to get the resources, specifically Bush Foundation, a very hard foundation to penetrate. But because it was an instruction from the other side, my application was taken to the right person who resonated with the domestic violence. And brother, I had asked for $25,000 because remember I had been unhoused for 8 years. I did not want to get bad money because getting a lot of money when you're starting can be bad when you don't know how to use it. I just wanted to create a program that I needed for myself when I was at rock bottom. And sure enough, later, about 3 weeks later, we got about $89,000. And I remember her name is Maggie. And she said to me, Comfort, I would like you to pay yourself enough to be housed well. Because I wrote my whole story in this.
In the application process.
Yes. And a funder who tells you, I want you to pay yourself enough well. So she was giving me back my dignity and my worth. She was reminding me of my self-worth. That's how Pumulani was formed. It was when I got the first grant and I could pay myself well to be housed and my brain to feel safe, where I found myself raising over $350,000 by COVID time, housing over 289 women from the homeless encampment camps through my partnership with DHS, because I knew what it was like to be unhoused and then to add a pandemic on top of that. And so the organization grew exponentially at the peak of the pandemic. I was given an opportunity to serve sisters who were in my shoes. We partnered with hotels like the Comfort Inn in Bloomington, and we housed a lot of indigenous sisters. We partnered with another hotel here in Brooklyn Park. We hosted a lot of African-American sisters who were unhoused. And that's kind of how Pumulani has been growing.
Lover of peace.
Lover of peace.
This is what peace can do. When you are at peace with yourself, when you find that positivity in the midst, you make a little heaven in hell.
Thank you. Thank you.
You know?
It's a bubble that cannot be tempered with.
And you said, I would not just get well. Look after the system.
I will get well with others. And I named it after my daughter because I wanted it to be a monument for me. I wanted it to be a reminder. So every time I see my beautiful daughter growing up, I wanted Pumulani. It wasn't a self-service thing. I actually wanted a reminder of my why. So when I look at Pumulani, I look at my Pumulani in the physical. And so Pumulani, the baby, both of them are my babies. I wanted to be reminded, and that's kind of the story behind it.
That's big. That's huge. Since you started Pumulani, you have been able to help all these sisters. Are you just doing it for the Black immigrant community?
No.
Okay.
Not at all. Actually, we get calls. I mean, I've housed women from Ukraine. Because a woman is a woman is a woman. But each organization has to have its area of focus for the purposes of grant writing. But our doors are open. My desire, or I think my life purpose, is to provide comfort to not just women, but to families so they can all be whole. But our program happens to serve women.
Which is perfectly okay.
But yeah, so we serve indigenous women come through, Latina women, Afro-Latina women.
So walk us through the kind of things that Pumulani address, apart from housing the homeless women who are coming from domestic violence. Are they just women coming from domestic violence, or you help even women who are just unhoused?
Women who are unhoused.
Okay, so it's not necessarily women suffering from domestic violence. Not
necessarily domestic violence, but we get a lot of referrals for women who are unhoused and also facing domestic violence. Usually there's a correlation.
All right.
Sometimes we'll get referrals from church, from a pastor, even including men. I've helped a lot of brothers as well. Okay. So students, international students sometimes. Pumulani is very unique in that we don't operate like mainstream programs.
Yes.
And this is seen through my books. My first book is called Facing the Giants. I talk about facing your giants, any challenges. And then my second book is called A Sacred Promise. So once you face your giant, you come into Pumulani, we get therapy, you get the tools you need, you face the giants that you need to face. If there's a criminal record, let's go face the giants And then you have to keep a sacred promise to yourself, according to my second book, that you are not going to be a victim for a long time.
Yeah.
We have a saying in Pumulani that says no one is coming to save you. Because victimhood is a very powerful drug.
Yeah.
When a woman who's been abused for a decade gets to Pumulani, it's very easy to stay in a Pumulani house for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And we use that approach to specifically keep women on their toes so they can understand their self-worth.
Yeah.
And there's a reason I started doing that program that way. I had a woman do that to me as well. She got her parents' house off the market in Plymouth. She gave me 1 month to figure myself out. Mm-hmm. And she told me the rent would be $2,500. And I had not paid rent for 8 years. I had to figure out how to build multiple streams of income to afford that mortgage. And so it's loving and tender, but it's also tough love.
It's tough love, yeah.
Because the mainstream programs, they tend to have the women sit around and do group.
Sustainable vulnerability.
And then after 90 days, you're on your own again. Yeah. So we see the cycle. So I said, not on my watch, we're not going to have that cycle. Mm-hmm. I literally just replicated what happened to myself to support the sisters. Yeah. Our program is also very unique because we believe that the best antidote to any problem is the owner of that problem. They have the medicine in them.
Sure.
Our job is just to help them identify those strengths. Mm-hmm. So we treat every woman as a whole woman. We don't have one size cookie cutter, approach. If I have a sister from Togo coming in, I want to understand her whole story and the things that she needs. Mm-hmm. And I think my superpower is I have established 22 years of relationships in Minnesota.
Yeah.
So from being connected to the governor's office to saying that I'm in DC, whatever the woman needs, we make sure that we hold her hand and we show her those things until she's ready to be sustainable on her own. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's our programming.
Wow.
It's a little bit of everything.
It's unique. And, I love the approach of showing that tough love.
Yes.
Because we don't want a cycle. I lived in Kenya for 9 years, I told you.
Yes.
I think that should be the largest slum in East Africa.
I think I know that slum. The Kibera slum, yes.
We have more than 200 NGOs all struggling to alleviate poverty in that slum, and that has been going on for as long as they have started being there as slum dwellers. But I tell you, the situations, the conditions, they
stay
never
the
change.
same. I was going to say, are they attempting to end it or they are sustaining?
So, I came to understand that some people create these NGOs to permanently keep vulnerable people vulnerable. So that the system continues. And when that system is there, then the funding continues.
Yes.
And when that funding continues, somebody has a sustainable livelihood. But I'm impressed with your approach because you're teaching these people.
Yes.
Yes, I'm here to support you in your condition. I identify with you and I want you to be your own.
Yes.
Why? Because if you are your own, you can easily lift somebody else.
Absolutely.
Think about you being able to come out of your situation.
Absolutely.
If you did not come out of your situation, think about the other women that you have helped.
Yes. This interview might as well be over. You just nailed it, brother. You just described and you just put words to what is the main problem with the NGOs, even in this work, in this movement that I'm in.
Yeah.
It's the cycle. Yeah.
So I'm just imagining like this approach is very key. I watched another program, I think it's in Uganda, where they literally give people money. They literally go to a village and they identify what the problems are with the people, and they literally give them lump sums of money after training them on what they can do. So they don't just come with the NGO program and say, okay, we're going to build a farm here and put a group of women and let you manage this on your own. No, they identify the problems that each family has, which of course are different.
Right.
There are some families they just don't have money to send their children to school.
Right.
There are some families they have a good plan, a good business plan,
right,
but they don't have the capital. As much as people say start small, so
they don't have the money.
We dream big, and we want to start big,
right?
You know. But I can tell you, it is more sustainable when you show that tough love.
True.
When you tell somebody, come, my hands are open, I'll embrace you.
Yes.
I'll cry with you.
Yes.
But this is how you come out of it.
That is so true.
And when you come out of it, you are strong enough to hold the next person.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I love that approach so much.
Thank you.
Keep on what you're doing. Keep on what you're doing.
Thank you, my brother.
Now you talk about the support that you got from the Bush Foundation.
Yes.
Do you have other organizations supporting this cause? Because this is very necessary.
Yes, we've been so blessed. I believe that there has been a divine appointment of resources that come at the right time as we need them. Our work is very unique and refuses to be boxed in like governmental, because those programs and those systems, they are not broken. They were created perfectly to look like they're broken, and that's where people keep falling in the cracks. So we've been so blessed to have a lot of support from private donors, private foundations. For example, my alma mater, the Sisters who studied St. Kitts, they've been a great supporter, sustaining us every month. But I also want to acknowledge, shout out, our governor, Governor Tim Walz's office, Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan. They prioritize those issues. Even Senator Amy Klobuchar's office, Senator Tina Smith's office, they've been prioritizing our work. And we've been getting funding to purchase more space. That was direct appropriation dollars. We didn't even have to apply so hard for it. It's just allocated. Those kind of resources also help our small organizations that don't have the capacity to be writing grants all the time. But yeah, I think the most valuable support I get is the one I get from my friends and family. They just believe in the work, they love the work, they volunteer. And all
that is exactly what I wanted to ask. How can the community, how can people support your organization?
Volunteers, October 1st, we are commemorating Gender-Based Violence Awareness Month, and we have our first ever fundraiser. It's more than a fundraiser. I don't want people to not come because of the fundraising aspect. It is more a check-in with community to show them the work we've been doing. We have a lot of testimonials from our survivors. It's different to hear, we're doing this. The talk is cheap. I would like people to come and actually experience the women, experience some of the women, powerful testimonies. So that's going to be October 1st. There's a breakfast from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m., just 1 hour. And then we also have a luncheon from noon to 2. So we'll be sharing those, and visit our website.
Awesome. And on the website, there's a donate button.
Yes. Hit that button.
Hit that donate button. And I tell you, these women don't only get vulnerable, but their children. Think about the children who look up to their mothers. I can imagine, I'm a young parent myself.
Beautiful.
And I can imagine sometimes the boy does not even want to sleep on the bed. The boy wants to sleep on the mother's chest. You can imagine a woman who is struggling. And they have this undeniable love and responsibility to take care of. So that donate button on the website, please make sure that you don't just scroll. And if you don't know what Pumulani is, find out more on the website. You'll find the website at the bottom of this the screen here.
Thank you so much.
And this is awesome. Now, you have been all around. It's not just in the US.
No.
You've been to East Africa.
Yes.
You've been to Southern Africa.
Yes.
You've even been to Europe.
I've been to, in West Africa as well.
What are you doing?
The Gambia.
What are you doing? You want to carry the whole world on your back?
I'm an amazing, avid follower of Yeshua, the greatest master, the greatest teacher of all time. He never stayed in his village. See, when they didn't honor him in his village, he was so tired of their stubbornness, so he would go to the next villages. That's just what I do. Whenever there's opportunity to make change, like in the Gambia, I remember meeting with Fatimata Barrow, the first lady, one of the first ladies of the Gambia, and telling her about how sickened I was with what I saw with older European men with young Gambian girls. That was an opportunity for policy change. And I'm just hearing that those policies are moving. So whenever I'm called, to serve, I try to use my story and my expertise to help whichever. I tried Dubai. I tried to do something in Dubai, but I was warned to stay away.
You were warned?
Yes, because I think it's the politics there is a little bit more complicated.
The Sharia law?
The Sharia law. I don't think it's the Sharia law. I think it's the gangsters who are abusing But that's the only part we haven't been able to penetrate. But in the Asian Pacific. But East, West, Central, Southern Africa, we've had some contributions to make and hope to continue to grow that way.
So you can hear that. That is it's not me. And how can a woman who maybe has come from Africa or is here in Minnesota or is somewhere watching this, listening to you speak, how can they reach out for help? If they are not, let's say, in Minnesota here.
Minnesota. The beauty of social media.
In fact, start with Minnesota. How can a Minnesota woman reach out to Pumulani?
With Minnesota, so you go to www.pumulani.org and it's PHUMULANI.org. Or you can just look up my name. So it's Comfort Dondo, Dondo. You will find me on several social media platforms. I have a very mighty team that is very responsive. So if a woman reaches out, we always respond.
Right.
Yes.
Wow. And that, I'm sure it cuts across the entire world.
It does.
If you are... Yes. And not to say that she's not interested in the Middle East. The regulations may not give her the space yet.
Yes.
But I always say, it's coming.
Yes, absolutely.
It's coming.
Absolutely.
So if you are a woman from the Middle East, I know you come all over here with a lot of cultural background, cultural stuff, and you're here with your husband, and you're facing domestic violence, please reach out.
Absolutely.
Reach out.
Absolutely.
And make sure that somebody helps you.
Definitely.
Because that help can go a long way to help those kids, those innocent kids.
Yeah.
Why is it important for women to tell these stories without shame, without fear?
The only way to heal a wound is to expose it. If you keep a wound hidden in your sock, bacteria loves to fester in it. So I think the first sign to healing is breaking the silence and doing it in a way that is not harmful. That is the only way to get your power back. And you can't rewrite your new story until you share the old story, erase it, and then rewrite the story. That's kind of what I believe. I
want to ask you something very, very personal.
Yes.
You just got engaged.
I did. I did.
How do you balance the old and the new?
See those 4 books I wrote? I was releasing a lot of the old, and then rewrote, and now we are rewriting.
Yeah?
Yes. Wow. So that's how we balance.
And when you see the red flags, do you say them, hey, this is a red flag?
Yes, absolutely. Now I'm empowered. I say it with love. I say in our partnership, I say I have some non-negotiables.
Yeah.
There are some intolerables, and then we can meet in the middle. Yeah. So, so I'm in a better place to articulate.
Awesome.
Yeah.
The lucky man.
Yes, very lucky.
This is what we need.
Yeah.
We'll be coming more and more for resources, even for men.
Absolutely.
The boy child down. You were having a discussion on, is it TED?
TED Talk, yes.
And you focused on the boy child.
Of course. I have brothers. You won't believe how many brothers come to my DM. You know, I've had men come and say, I was violated when I was a boy.
Okay.
But men don't cry, right? Boys don't cry.
Yeah.
And imagine meeting that young man, your daughter meeting that young man, and they're in a relationship, and he has that trauma. So whether we are focusing, if I decide to focus Pumulani with just women and block men out, I'm doing a disservice to the other part of me. Because we need to balance each other. So
you have a boy child?
I have 2 beautiful boys.
They will become men tomorrow.
I know that I'm raising them to be. I'm raising them to be carers of their sister.
Kings.
Yes. To practice how to be kings with their mother and their sister.
And to understand that the primary duty of a king is service.
Is service.
Taking care of their subjects.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Not sitting and be served.
I know, exactly. Thank you. I love that.
Wow.
Yes.
No, Sister Komi, this is so... This is an inspiring conversation. I am inspired by your story.
Thank you.
And I'm sure the rest of the world, anybody who happens to have heard this story, anybody who... How can we find the books, by the way?
The books, they're on Amazon.
They're on Amazon?
Yes, on Amazon.
All right.
Yes.
So in the book, you'll get more, way more than what you have here.
Absolutely.
But if you want to still get more, the contact of Pumulani is right underneath. Don't just hear her story. What is your story?
Yes.
What is your story? What are you hiding? What are you keeping from telling people? You can talk to a sister.
Oh, yes.
You can come and see her. You can talk with her. And she can help you.
Yes.
She can guide you the steps towards freedom, the steps towards peace. And she's not against anybody who doesn't want to break up from the offender.
Yeah.
If there is a way of working it out, she works with men as well. She works with the boy child because she knows the babies, the boy that she's raising today would be somebody's husband tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Would be a governor tomorrow.
Yes.
Would be a teacher tomorrow.
Yes.
And so she raises this boy in the way that she wants to see her own husband.
Absolutely.
She raises this boy in a way that she wants to see the governor, the teacher.
Absolutely.
The friend.
Yes.
So please, if you have children, boy child who are undergoing some kind of challenges, abuse, you can also talk to Sister Comfort here.
Yes.
And she'll be able to help you.
Oh, yeah.
Sister Comfort.
My brother.
Where do you see Pumulani in the next 10 years?
You know, I see Pumulani in as many nations on a global platform. My next book project is actually a workbook for sexual violence prevention in children.
Okay.
And I would like every Department of Education to have these books for children. So I say we are going to the roots so we can do more prevention. Then right now we are curing. Yeah. We want to go with prevention. Yeah. And I'm also seeing Pumulani in the philanthropy space. So we want to move beyond just servicing services provision, but we also want to be giving grants out because there's a lot of sisters that we have worked with who are doing amazing work, even here in Minnesota. We want to be able to help them fundraise and support their work because we cannot do this work alone. We need more people. So
we need more hands. And you are really creating more hands. You're creating more space. And that is all we need to do. Each one, lift one.
Absolutely.
And we change the entire world.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much
for your time.
Thank you.
Ashe, I appreciate it.
For you to bring your story to the world is not a joke.
Thank you. This is beautiful.
Yeah.
It's an honor every time I can share. Yeah.
Any question for me? Ask me
Are you raising any daughters?
Not at the moment.
At the moment.
But I can tell
Nieces?
you that I have so many girl children who see me as a father figure.
Beautiful.
And I encourage other men out there, it's important to stand with these children.
Yes.
When you can.
Yes.
And be genuine. Be have conversations that matter in their lives.
Yes.
So personally, I don't have a daughter in the house
yet,
but there are so many daughters out there.
Beautiful.
Who look up to me.
That's awesome.
Sometimes we go into conversations that I believe my daughter should be having with me.
That's awesome.
Some of them are still in their very tender ages.
That's
and I know that they're growing up.
Yes.
And I try to impart in them what the society expects of them and what they should expect to do to keep themselves safe and strong.
I love that.
Yeah.
I think you absolutely got won my heart today, because that was the question that was coming was and my comment to that is men have a very crucial role to play in modeling acceptable behavior to the girl child. As mothers also have a crucial, mothers and fathers have a crucial role to play with our boy child.
That's true.
In modeling what is acceptable behavior.
Yes.
I think that is one of the prevention strategies we should use in our homes. So, yeah.